Good evening, you're watching News Today. I'm Preeti Choudhry. Our top focus is on the blockbuster year-end interview of India Today's newsmaker of the year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And believe me, he's given us a lot to talk and debate upon, and that's coming up over the course of the next 1 hour. But before that, let me take you through the headlines. Exclusive inaugural ceremony details of the Ram Mandir. Prime Minister Modi to unveil deity of Lord Ram, apply kajal in eyes of Lord Ram. Lord Ram to be bathed in holy waters. Right ahead of Prime Minister's visit, Chief Minister Yogi reviews preparations in Ayodhya.
इसी रूप में उनका जितना जिसमें जरूरत पड़ती है, जो वस्तुओं की आवश्यकता है वो सब एकत्रित हो गया है. अब केवल 22 जनवरी की प्रतीक्षा है और उसी दिन प्राण प्रतिष्ठा होगी.
Congress distances from Sam Pitroda's statement on Ram Mandir invites as Pitrota gave views of his own and not of party. Right ahead of mega Ayodhya airport inauguration, Aviation Mantri Sindhya reveals strategy for the opening the doors for devotees.
Our airports now very much espouse the Prime Minister's thought of local for vocal and local for global.
Nitish becomes the JDU president once again after Lallan Singh resigns and proposes Nitish to take back party reins. A tripartite peace accord between the pro-talks factions of the United Liberation Front Centre and the Assam government was signed, aiming to end decades of insurgency in the northeastern states. Superstars Kamal Hassan and Rajnikant pay tribute to late DMDK chief Captain Vijay Kant. Captain's last rites performed with full state honours. A body of a 9-year-old girl was found in a swimming pool of a residential complex in Bengaluru. Father claims daughter died due to electrocution. Lakshmi Narayan Temple President attacked in Surrey. House of Temple President's son attacked. 14 rounds fired at house allegedly by Khalistanis. And India's forex reserves jumped $4.47 billion to reach $620.44 billion. It is at a 21-month high.
India Today Newsmaker of the Year 2023. Biggest interview ahead of 2024. Exhaustive and incisive. Prime Minister Modi exclusive.
And as promised, viewers, our top focus as this year ends, the biggest interview from India Today's newsmaker of the year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, spoke to India Today's chairperson and editor-in-chief Arun Puri, Vice Chairperson Kali Puri and Group Editorial Director Publishing Raj Chengappa. Now, what was an hour-long interaction? The Prime Minister spoke passionately on a range of key domestic and international issues, and we're going to decode that interview through the course of the next 1 hour with our panelists this evening. Joining me, Pawan Verma, author, diplomat, former Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha; Swapan Das Gupta, Member BJP, National Executive; Manikam Tagore, Congress MP; Raj Chengappa, Group Editorial Director, Publishing, India Today Group; and Rajdeep Sardesai, whose show it is, joins us all the way from Goa. All right, so in that hour-long interview, viewers, Lots of questions were asked on key important issues, be it elections, be it economy, or even artificial intelligence. Some of the key points we've picked up. And let's immediately cut across to the first question that was posed to him, which has been open speculation in many television studios ever since the 5 state election results have come knocking. Is 2024 a done deal? That was the question that was posed, the question on everyone's mind. Is 2024 a done deal? When India Today asked this question to the Prime Minister, if he is eyeing a hat-trick, he said, and I quote, "Regarding 2024, it's not a question of my confidence. The only thing in my hand is to give my everything in the service of people. I'm trying to do this with utmost honesty and commitment, but today there is a consensus among the people, the experts, the opinion makers and friends from the media too, that our country doesn't need a milli-juli sarkar. We have lost 30 years due to instability resulting from milli-juli sarkars. People have seen the lack of governance, the appeasement, politics, corruption in the era of milli-juli sarkars. This resulted in a loss of optimism and confidence amongst the people and gave a bad image to India in the world. So naturally, the choice of people is the BJP." I want to immediately cut across to Raj Chengappa, who's with us. Raj, you were there when you took that interview from the Prime Minister. Interesting on the question of 2024. He says, I don't want to sound overconfident, but when you look at it, he seems to, and once we even give out the other points of the interview, to him, it does seem that 2024 is a done deal. He's talking about 5 years from now.
I think more than that, Preeti, is that he's laying the grounds for what the election would be like and what would be the key issues. And he's talking about stability and performance. At a time that all of us have faced a tremendous amount of distress because of COVID, there is a global economic slowdown. And what he's contrasting is, and that's why he does not mention, very, very interestingly, does not mention, though we had pushed him on many occasions, to talk about the India alliance per se. He does not mention them, but indirectly he calls them the milli-juli sarkar that could come about, and then reflects back on the past 30 years or so of coalition governments and says what India needs at this particular time is stability and a government that performs. And this is a theme that he sort of, not only in this question, but right across sort of did it. It is, and also interestingly brought in this issue of Parivarwad, where he said it's performance versus Parivarwad, and talked of how the BJP, and used this point of the Hindi heartland states where they got a whole lot of new chief ministers, and said, we are a cadre-based party and we look for fresh faces. We don't just, push on with dynasties.
We're going to talk about his comments on dynastic politics also later on in the show. But Rajdeep, I want to bring you in because interesting, he speaks of not the India alliance, but milli-juli sarkar a number of times, and taking off from what Raj was saying, pointing out very clearly the stability that his government provides, the clear narrative messaging that his government provides versus what would be a hodgepodge government, if at all it is the India alliance.
Absolutely, Preeti. And look, this has been the Prime Minister's USP, particularly in the last 5 years. In 2014, he came to power promising Achhe Din. That could be seen more as a vote against the UPA government at the time. In 2019, he spoke of a strong, robust nationalism. Today, he's speaking about a strong, robust nationalism, but contrasting it with what he claims is the government of the Majboor, a Majboor Sarkar, a government of compulsion, of coalition compulsions, contrasting his government effectively with what the India alliance may have to offer. And this is a template that the opposition has not been able to challenge yet. The fact is, because the opposition has not been able to get its act together, the Prime Minister's claim that he alone can provide this kind of stable leadership stands out. And therefore, he's focusing on what is his big asset, this image of a populist, muscular, nationalist leader who's promising stability, offering the dream of a Amrit Kal in 2047, versus an opposition that seems to be coming together at the moment on a single plank of anti-Modism. So the moment you contrast the two, the Prime Minister comes across very strong and an effective leader. So I think he's focusing on his strengths and not and almost asking you, don't look at my weaknesses. I haven't fulfilled all my promises, but the one thing that I have fulfilled is provided you with a relatively stable leadership over the last 10 years.
You know, there's a point in that, Manikam Tagore, if you look at it, whether you like it, whether you dislike it, whichever way one might want to view it, there's a clear vision, narrative, and that has been laid out in this interview as well, where the Prime Minister, if you look at the narrative, Manikam Tagore, firmly there is a Prime Minister face which is there, which is the Prime Minister himself. On the other hand, you have the Viksit Sankalp Yatra, where he talks about, which ties into the La Bharati section, which we're going to talk a little later about. Even if it be the Ram Mandir, all of that in totality, where it contrasts to your own on what you have to offer of the India alliance, it just doesn't match up, and you can see that.
Thank you. This is like the India shining story. It is coming to that level because everything is shining for them from the race course road. But the reality is bleak, and the unemployment rate, all things are in different level. And we need to understand that Mr. Modi as a Prime Minister can keep on saying about the Mili-Juli Sarkar, as the terms he has been using in India today. India's parliamentary democracy means conversation. Cabinet form of government has been for 70 years. It has not been authoritarian. He has changed it for 9 years. Is one man's decision, or two men sit together and decides everything. Therefore, the decision-making power of the cabinet has gone. It's only one man, and the other man decides. Both of them, one man decides and second man executes. This autocratic functioning is dangerous for India. That is our narrative. We are saying that 146 MPs has been thrown out of the parliament.
Right. But Manikam Tagore, you know what you talk about.
Passed, but there is no conversation about
what
it.
You talk about dictatorial, he's turned it around, and for him, it's the Modi hai to mumkin hai moment. And that is what people are actually buying into.
People are not buying. People on in 2024, when they line up to vote, you will see it, because he as Prime Minister is speaking about only the 50% vote. He is not worried about the 100% vote. 100% Indians. He is speaking about to get 50% vote is his idea. Therefore, he speaks to his audience, his voters. That is his idea.
Okay.
But
Swapan Das Gupta,
India Alliance is going to speak to people.
Well, at least in the Hindi heartland, and very recently, a month ago, Manikam Tagore, it didn't quite work out the way you thought it would. But Swapan Das Gupta, the Prime Minister speaking of his vision for 2024, where somewhere down the line, other than the fact that how his government provides stability while the Mili-Juli Sarkar is just a motley crew of political parties or a hodgepodge government, even if it ever does come to power. But ultimately, if you look at this interview, Swapan Das Gupta, audacious is not a bad word, but he seems to think that it's a done deal. He's speaking of what he plans to do in the next 5 years, 10 years.
Preeti, if you look very carefully at the interview, I think Raj was very right in pointing out that basically it spells out the approach which he's going to take for the next election. And in that, what comes across is, of course, there is that negative dimension, which is the lament about India's 30 wasted years, the Mili-Juli Sarkar and all that. But outside that, what you find is a complete narrative about the achievements of this government, and he's tried to link the achievements of this government with an approach which he adopted right from the time of his tenure in Gujarat. And what he's trying to say is that, look, we've achieved so much, we've taken the country towards the path of development, the developed nation, Viksit Bharat. We've taken it to the path of greatness, and now it's the job of the electorate, and we are approaching the electorate to say that we'll give it another chance to take it across. And I think that's really what it is. It's a position of consolidation of the gains which have been there for the past 10 years. And therefore, this is an achievement card, a performance card, coupled with a promise. So I think you've got to look upon it in that way. Now, of course, there are others who might say that, look, he's not focused on this. The real issue is the question of his leadership style, etc. Now, all those narratives are likely to come during the election time. I mean, that's what elections are for, where you have competitive narratives. But I think as far as understanding the mind of the Prime Minister is concerned, I think this interview does very well in telling us this is what to expect in the next 4 months of campaigning.
All right, and one of those narratives which would be built as a strong BJP pitch in the next 4 months of campaigning will be the Viksit Bharat mission. And let's quickly now cut across to what the Prime Minister had to say on that. The Prime Minister explained in detail in this interview why he thinks the $5 trillion economy target is realistic. Our track record speaks for itself, he says, and I quote, "When I became Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2001, the size of its economy was around 26 billion, rupees 2.17 lakh crores. When I left Gujarat to become the Prime Minister of the country, the size of Gujarat's economy had become 133.5 billion, which is about 11.1 lakh crores. And as a result of the various policies and reforms today, Gujarat's economy is around 260 billion, which is 21.6 lakh crores. Similarly, when I became Prime Minister in 2014, the size of India's economy was 2 trillion, rupees 167 lakh crore. And at the end of 2023-24, India's GDP will be more than 3.75 trillion, which is rupees 312 lakh crore. It is this track record of 23 years which shows this is a realistic target. Raj, to bring you in on this, to draw comparisons to Gujarat, somewhere down the line, it's also, trust me, there's a trust factor. It will happen.
Yeah, I think he's playing to his strengths. Tell me which other leader has been both a chief minister and a prime minister and is now serving for 23 years. The only other person who is possibly doing that is Naveen Babu, Naveen Patnaik in Odisha, but he's only been a chief minister. He's never been prime minister. So he is contrasting that and saying, look, I am the leader. I've delivered in the past and I will deliver again. And you'd mentioned Viksit Bharat. This is a question that we asked him because there is a sort of a vague notion about what Viksit Bharat is all about, right? It sounds great that we should be a developed country by 2047. In fact, I did ask him that the common definition of a developed country is that per capita income should be $20,000. We are $2,000 at the moment. Second is that you must have a world-class infrastructure. We are building towards that. And third, of course, is governance and democratic institutions. This is the broad definition. But he was very clear and he said, look, that's only part of it. There are, 100 more characteristics of a developed country. And then he outlined 3 things that he was doing. He's not being vague in this. He said, first, you need skill development and a complete mindset change among our youth to work out from, create opportunities out of problems. And that's what the new education policy is working towards. And the second thing he emphasized was that he was going to focus on small and medium-sized businesses and saying that he's going to enable them to develop into a larger units. And that was going to be one of the key thrust areas. And the third, he said, was a complete revamp of the investment and financial markets. So he is not being vague. When he's talking about growth, he might be putting a target of 2047, he might be putting a target of $5 trillion and becoming the third largest economy. But he says, these are the nuts and bolts that I'm going to work on. And I've not got just 3, but I've got 10 or 12 different plans that's happening. And by the way, Preeti, which I've mentioned in my article that's there, which sort of explains why India Today magazine decided that Mr. Modi would be the newsmaker of the year. He has put together, they asked the Niti Ayog to put together the entire 2047 of Viksit Bharat plan. 10 secretarial groups have been formed, and they will present to him, possibly in the new year, the first week of the new year, as to what is their whole deliberation. So he is not leaving this in a very woolly sort of way and vague, just promising a pie in the sky. He is very clear that he's taking the direction. And then coming back to what Shravan said, this is the second point. I have a plan. And he's asking the opposition, do you have anything more than just Parivarwad and your hate for Mr. Modi.
You know, Pawan Verma, to bring you in on this, it's interesting because, when we talk about the economy, where he lays down his vision for the $5 trillion economy, which has been hotly debated in many television studios, he does somewhere down the line also give a plan of action to that.
Undoubtedly, the Prime Minister has a vision for the country, and he plans long term, plans in meticulous detail, and he has declared that his goal is for India to become a developed country by 1947, which is a laudable target. But Preeti, if I may, for just 30 seconds, since you ignored me on that first question,
apologies, sir.
I want to say
Go ahead, sir.
that Prime Minister Modi's personal popularity is high for several reasons, including his hard work and eloquence. But I think partly it's also because we have had one of the most dismal, divided, fractious and ineffective politicians on a pan-India scale. And it is true that there is a new level of authoritarianism within the BJP. But when Mr. Manikam Tagore talks about the writ of 1.5 people or 2 people in the BJP as supreme, I want to ask him, what's the position in the Congress? Who decides? We all know that it is the Gandhi family, and in specific terms, Mr. Rahul Gandhi does that. So even though he occupies no post either at the organizational level or in Parliament, and that is where the Prime Minister's attack on dynastic parties and the lack of inner party democracy in them hits a bullseye. And that is the truth. We have rarely seen an opposition which over 10 years has not been able to build a credible and convincing narrative which touches the people and speaks about their lives and the problems they face in an electorally efficient manner. So it's time to admit that. And it is also time to recognize that Prime Minister Modi's popularity has something to do with that. As regards your second question, yes, India must aim to become a developed country, but I think we need to understand the full nuances of that. Raj referred to per capita factors. I am also concerned sometimes that although our achievements have been many, and I can list them for the Prime Minister, although he's done that in India Today's interview, I think there are issues of India being able to utilize its demographic dividend of the young, because many of those whom we produce from our educational universities and colleges, if they get the chance to go there, are unemployable. And the fact of the matter is that we may be one of the youngest nations in the world if we don't produce a skilled enough force to be employed. And if there are not enough jobs for them, if the manufacturing sector has not grown and agriculture is moribund at 16% of the GDP of the economy, we have a big problem. So I think that the level of inequality in India today, where the gap between the rich and the poor has widened to such a level, is something that must be factored into an otherwise laudable goal of making India a developed country.
All right. I'm going to move on from what you just touched upon, when you began your opening remarks, sir, which is where you spoke of the Modi factor. Well, when we asked the Prime Minister, what is the Modi guarantee, which has been once again debated many a times over, especially after the Hindi heartland states, which had Prime Minister on the ticket and all going to the BJP. This is how the Prime Minister defined the Modi guarantee. Well, only someone who has experienced a life of poverty, and I quote the Prime Minister here, understands that the greatest force propelling a poor person forward is life, is their trust, their hope. This faith of the poor is what keeps me going. Modi will put in his all, but will not let the trust of his poor brothers and sisters break. Modi's guarantee is not a formula made for winning elections. Modi's guarantee is the trust of the poor. Today, every poor person in the country knows that Modi will not back down from his duty. Today, every poor person is aware of how political parties in the past have broken their trust. But they also know that Modi's guarantees can be trusted. This trust of the poor also gives me my energy, even if I completely exhaust myself or push myself over my limits. I will not let this trust be violated. And Rajdeep, this is when the trust factor that comes in, where Modi is on the ticket, invariably there's a sense of trust that this man will deliver.
Look, the word trust has been used half a dozen times. And if there is one word that symbolizes Mr. Modi's connect with a large number of people, it's the word trust. I think over time, both in Gujarat and now at the center, Mr. Modi has been able to build a certain connect with his voters based on this concept of Vishwas or trust. If you remember in the last election, there was a ditty, Modi hai to mumkin hai. If Mr. Modi is there, anything is possible. Now you're taking it from there to Modi ki guarantee. And he's personalizing it. Look, he is in that sense a populist strongman who's saying, look, forget about my party, vote for me. It's about the personality of Mr. Modi and the trust that he's been able to build over the last 2 decades in power, both in Gujarat and in India, which he's looking as, again, as his big USP. That, again, is to be contrasted with the opposition, but at the end of the day is headed by leaders who perhaps do not even have a fraction of that experience in public life. And that makes a huge difference. Look, Mr. Modi is determined, it appears, to make 2024 once again a leadership contest. The opposition wants to make it about constitutional issues. Look at the manner in which MPs are suspended. Look at the manner in which institutions have been compromised. Look at authoritarian rule. He's saying, forget all that. Have faith in me. I'm someone who's come from the grassroots, has been in public life for 50 years. Therefore, have faith in me. And then goes on to say, in a subsequent quote in that interview, nation first. So he's, in a way, once again playing. It's the Modi playbook. He did it in 2019. He wants to do it in 2024. I don't see any major difference in the politics and the political playbook of 2019 and 24. This is personality politics of a strongman leader who's saying, have trust in me above all else.
Manikam Tagore, let me spin this around for you. You and your party were the ones who bought in the guarantee card. You fought the Karnataka elections on the Congress guarantee. And now, the way the Prime Minister and the BJP has spun it around, it's about Modi's guarantee. The trust factor lying more with Modi's guarantee.
We know that Mr. Modi is using the word Modi guarantee again and again for the past 1 month, and we know that Congress guarantees has worked in the ground, and people has connected with the guarantee in a very big way, and therefore he's saying about his achievements as guarantees, whatever he has called it as achievements. But one thing is very clear that this, Mr. Rajdeep was saying about the India Alliance leadership, and India Alliance leadership has great potential leaders, and it's a cabinet form of government. We are still in government, cabinet form of government. We are not in a presidential form of government. And Mr. Modi is always believes that he is the only man who can solve everybody's problem, and that's not working here. And poverty is increasing. The rich-poor divide has increased in a big way. 5% of Indians controls 60% of the wealth, and bottom 50% of the people controls only 5% of the whole wealth itself. India is becoming into a different country than in 10 years before. And he is saying about Mili Juli Sarkar for 30 years, which include Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government also. He is blaming that government also, which every BJP person thought that it's a democratic and a cabinet formed by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. The government of Mr. Modi is going towards an end that they only want to win elections, and for that they can take everybody's name and take everybody's words also. Even guarantee has been stolen from Congress.
But the fact is the same guarantee which you said is stolen from the Congress, Manikam Tagore, worked very well for the BJP in the 3 states in the Hindi heartland. It was Modi's guarantee. But, I just want to cut across to Raj back, and Raj, taking off from what Rajdeep said, that 2024 is clearly going to be a personality contest because the Prime Minister spoke very clearly on what his vision is, the Modi guarantee, and where the chemistry is concerned, the arithmetic of the India alliance aside, the chemistry lies with Modi.
Preeti, I think Manikam Tagore has a point. It was the Congress that coined this whole business of guarantees. Let's also then see how cleverly Mr. Modi has taken that and made it his own. And why is he doing that? Because he knows, let's not forget there was this huge battle which Ms. Modi initiated versus what he called the Revdi culture and welfare measures. Now, Mr. Modi, if you look at his record, and this is not playing by the playbook, as Rajdeep could be saying, though I agree with some of the points that Rajdeep made, is that his track record, if you look at his first term, he had built toilets, he had built housing, he had, in terms of the other factors, roads, everything that had to do with including farmers. He's built a whole set of welfare programs, which we have now popularly called the Labharatis who benefited. That included, free gas connections and everything else. What does he do in his second term? He actually, launches this huge program for drinking water, tap drinking water, called the Har Ghar Jal program. One of the largest, where you had only 16% of the population having tap water supply, drinking water supply. And today, within 4 or 5 years after he made that announcement on Independence Day, there are 76% of the households in India that have it. So what he is contrasting is that the guarantees that, I think in some senses, the BJP was shaken by what happened in Karnataka as well as in Telangana. And their reaction, and this is the counter that Mr. Modi gives, and quite, convincing as well, because he has this track record where he has, in fact, been seen as the messiah of the poor, has delivered extensively, coined this very neat way of saying the Modi guarantee. And if you notice, his thing is about the poor, the needy, and building their trust on this factor. So he's really appealing to that section of society, which is very large. Let's not also forget that though the economy is growing at the rate it is doing, one of the fastest growing in the world, probably the fastest at the moment if you look at major economies, there is, economists talk of a K-shaped growth. And certainly that K-shape means that the rich are getting richer, or the middle class are getting richer, and the poor their lot is not improved. And the fact is that since these guarantees come out and does have traction in my home state, Karnataka, and we saw in Telangana, there is some problem that is there that needs to be addressed, which he needs to do as well. The fact is that the economy might be booming. There might be other, stocks could be doing, but there is a nation that has been hit hard by COVID and needs to recover. He is covering his flanks in many senses by this Modi guarantee and saying, I will give you more. I've delivered these many welfare projects. I will do it, when I come back to power in 2024 as well.
Swapan Dasgupta, there's a point that Manikam Tagore also raised, that this is about one person, not the party. And, later on in the interview, he's also spoken of, the election of 3 chief ministers out of nowhere in the Hindi heartland, what we saw recently, and how it's a process where the BJP is concerned and cannot happen in the Congress. But it once again does point out to the high command culture, the centralization of power.
Well, look, if you really look at the election, it's undeniable that elections are getting more and more presidential under Mr. Modi. And that's partly because Mr. Modi has now acquired the necessary credibility to make it so. When you point out that India is a different place, Mr. Tagore pointed that out. He said India is a very different place today. He's right. In the past 10 years, the actual face of India has been transformed by the actions of the Modi government. And he's pointing out the various shortcomings of this Modi government, inequality, etc., etc. Now, they might exist on a macro academic level, but the point is, most people who vote, and when asked the question, are you better off today than you were 5 or 10 years ago, their answer is an unequivocal yes. We are better off. Our lives are changing. Our lives have changed. And it is for that reason that they repose the faith in Mr. Modi. Now, as far as the experiments with the relatively inexperienced chief ministers are concerned, I think the answer to that is that in many cases it succeeded, in many cases it may not succeed. And as far as Mr. Modi is concerned, he's looking upon himself as a case study. I remember when Mr. Modi was catapulted to the chief ministership in 2002, in 2001, most people said, but this man has not even ever contested for a municipal election. And there are so many stalwarts there. But you see, it's the approach, it's the aptitude, and it's the opportunity which BJP workers all along the line feel that they are getting under Modi, which explains why there is a fierce sense of loyalty, apart from the fact that Mr. Modi is the big vote catcher. So the answer to all these things is that yes, Mr. Modi has changed the nature of Indian politics. He's changed it. You may like it, you may dislike it. But there is a difference thing in Indian politics. And I still think it's in a process of evolution. But for the moment, it's Modi who is occupying center stage of that change.
Well, you're right. There's no denial of that. Mr. Pawan Verma, before you accuse me of not coming to you, would you want to add to that, sir?
No, I think that right now, Mr. Modi enjoys a popularity and trust, not only for his own achievements, because no government is entirely bad or entirely good, but there are some very tangible achievements of this present government. But also, as I have mentioned, and I will maintain this, for the lack of a charismatic face and an opposition which has a narrative and electoral organizational strength, which the BJP has in great measure. I would advise, for whatever it matters, that in future, when we look at a developed country and Mr. Modi's guarantee to give it to us, we really must look also at the underbelly of India. Preeti, I think the government needs to concentrate much more on education and health. Now, I'm not going to get into statistical debates, but you are witness and you travel this country for length and breadth. The state of primary education at the level of the countryside is in shambles, and we don't provide enough in our budget or come up with schemes to upgrade our educational system, which is the incubation, which is the nursery to provide the talent, ultimately to man a developed India. Similarly, on health, I think India must rank as amongst the countries with the lowest allocation to health. And if Mr. Modi is moving towards a developed India, and I said that's laudable, I think these are areas which should be looked at instead of painting a completely one-sided narrative that Modi hai to mumkin hai. Mumkin hai, but this must include all of this as well.
You know, there are two things with, taking off from what Verma said, that the government has very often faced criticism from not just the opposition, but many political and other analysts as well, over the issue of price rise and job creation. Now, when we posed the question, the Prime Minister rebutted the criticism about the lack of jobs. Now, he says, and I quote with what he told us, it is well known that investments in infrastructure have a larger multiplier impact on growth and employment. Hence, we have constantly increased capital investment outlay. The budget of 23-24 has increased steeply to 10 lakh crores, up from 1.9 lakh crores in 2013-2014. Labour markets have witnessed falling unemployment rates, down from 5.8% in 2018-19 to 3.2% in 22-23. This has been accompanied by rising labour force participation rates, increasing from 50.2% in 2018-19 to 57.9% in 22-23. The EPFO had 277.4 million members as of March 31st, 2022, compared to 117.8 million on March 31st, 2014. Now, the Prime Minister claims his government has handled price rises better than the UPA when it came down to inflation and price rise. Now, he says, and I quote again, "Let's put allegations aside and discuss the facts. Despite 2 years of a once-in-a-century pandemic and global conflicts disrupting global value chains and even causing recessionary pressures across the world, India has shown remarkable resilience. Despite heavy odds, global crisis, supply chain breakdown, and geopolitical tensions impacting global prices of basic items, average inflation from 2014-15 to 23-24 was only 5.1% compared to 8.2% during the previous 10 years, which is higher inflation of 5.1% or 8.2%. Raj, you want to come in on weigh on this?
You know, the jury will always be out on this question because economists will throw statistics on one side saying that, look, we've brought inflation down, we've kept the jobs going. And there'll be those who will counter and say there's K-shaped growth and there are other issues that's there. I think what Mr. Modi has done is this is the opposition's crux. That, there are high prices and which he hasn't been able to contain, particularly food prices, and the fact that jobs are not easily done. He has brought out statistics to show through the periodic labor force that, look, in fact, if you see COVID devastated jobs as we, for most of us did, there was a huge drop, but he shows that there is growth that has happened in the last 3-4 years, at least of 5 to 6%, which is very creditable. Now, other economists would argue and say that, look, if you actually deconstruct that, a lot of this is self-employed jobs and the fact that they are unpaid jobs, meaning that these people who till their own land and everything else, that is being counted as this. But overall, if you look at the way the economy has been ticking, a 6.2% average growth rate, the fastest that is happening across the world in major economies. China is down to 4 to 5%. America's, 1.5%. The world average is 3%. The fact is India is at a sweet spot. There is a great deal of optimism as we've seen in the stock markets. There is a lot going for Mr. Modi as he gets into his final year. And the fact that India Today magazine declares him as, the newsmaker of the year is that he has performed in the 10th year when normally prime ministers are, their levels of credibility have dropped, as we saw with Dr. Manmohan Singh. But his popularity ratings is close to 50 to 55% in our own Mood of the Nation polls. This gives him the ballast. And let's now look at this tremendous year that he's done, that he's gone through. The economy is doing very well. He has brought in the Women's Empowerment Bill. Here, Chandrayaan was a success. Partly, that's the scientist. But yes, it is, he had pursued it and has actually brought down a very, very good space policy that's there. Article 370, his stand has been vindicated by the Supreme Court itself. And if you take a look at internationally, he has G20. He shows that he's arrived at the world stage.
Right.
He's able to make India look as the voice of the global south, and then has a terrific meeting with Biden, where the U.S. president actually commits to selling very sensitive defense equipment to India, a new partnership that, in many senses, rivals, equals what Dr. Manmohan Singh did with the nuclear deal. So in this 1 year is action-packed. And of course, let's not forget, he also had the new parliament inaugurated, among other things that he was doing to change the criminal laws. So here is a man in his 10th year. So what you're seeing is just not the economy. You have to take the entire thing. And that is why I think when we asked him the question about whether 2024 is a done deal, he seemed very, very confident of it, and then took a swipe at the opposition and said, we do not want a military sarkar that is there.
No, you can't be away from the truth, because if you read his interview, it talks of the next 5-6 years. He seems to be planning for that. 2014 is just a small hurdle, which he thinks he's going to scale very easily. But Manikam Tagore, when you talk about inflation, because a lot, in this debate itself, you've brought it up, you've brought about, the issue of jobs. But with what the Prime Minister says. Now, he's given out figures and he's compared 2014-15 to 23-24 till November. Inflation only 5.1% compared to 8.2% during the previous 10 years of your term, which was 2004 to 2014. Now, he asks, which is higher, 5.1% or 8.2%, Manikam Tagore? Mr. Tagore, that question's for you. All right, I don't think Manikam Tagore can hear us. But, Rajdeep, with what Raj Chingappa also said, the Prime Minister Modi seeking his third term at a high where, clearly everything seems to be working for him. But when you come down to jobs, when you come down to inflation, it has been, if not the Achilles heel, but it's been the pea under the mattress for the government.
Well, I think the government has every reason to take credit, to pat itself on the back when it comes to inflation. I think in very tough circumstances, the government has managed inflation. Let's also be fair. It's not, it's very easy to compare UPA and NDA. The UPA went through very difficult times post the global financial crisis in 2008. But you could argue that the government has handled inflation reasonably well. Jobs is a big question mark. The Prime Minister has thrown some figures in the interview. You'll have others who will throw other figures at you in the interview, particularly in the informal sector. The truth of the matter is jobs is a big issue. You go across the country and you realize there is a demographic dividend that can become rapidly a demographic disaster. One of the reasons why in recent times the Prime Minister has been forced to say, look, the government will provide 10 lakh jobs is because there's a recognition that jobs is a major issue. You've got in states now, even in Maharashtra, for example, the demand for caste-based reservations recurring because there is a concern that people believe they haven't got the jobs, and they're talking about government jobs here. Forget about private jobs being created. So we can debate endlessly about, the opposition will tell you all is doom and gloom, and the Modi cheerleaders will say it's life is milk and honey. The truth lies somewhere in between. And I think this interview, in a sense, at least what the Prime Minister is doing is putting forward his claims as to why he should get re-elected. I think the challenge in a way lies for the opposition to tell us why they should vote out Mr. Modi. Indians vote out someone. And I think the failure of the
All right, okay, Rajdeep, we've lost you. We've lost that connection. But Swapan Das Gupta, taking off from what Rajdeep said and taking off from what even Mr. Pawan Verma said, has this government been able to actually leverage the demographic dividend, which could, go the other way? Because there is a lack of jobs, whichever way one might want to look at it.
It's not a question of lack of jobs. I think what has happened is that the demand for jobs is considerable. And naturally, no government can actually meet that entire demand. So yes, there is a deficit. But what this has been compensated in various ways is a mood of optimism in this country, whereby there is a feeling that with innovation, that with technology, and that with a certain amount of degree of India's exposure in the global world market, we are now somewhere in the midst of a change whereby the entire nature of what economic activity used to be is going to change. Now that transition is still not happened. It's still work in progress in various ways. It's very interesting that the Prime Minister spoke at length about how semiconductors and AI have become priorities for the government, which again, and he spoke about how this should have actually happened 30 years ago, but it didn't. So we are now in the process of also, apart from actually doing a maintenance job of an old economy, we are creating we've laid the foundations for a new approach to the world's situation, to the economy. And I think this is really what will need to pay dividends in the future, which is what the Prime Minister's optimism is really based on. It's not based on the fact that the old manufacturing jobs are not there, that there's been a slight sluggishness in certain sectors, but the fact that there are newer opportunities which are being created. I'm afraid I must take your leave now because I've got to go.
All right,
But
okay.
thank you very much for.
Well, Mr. Dasgupta, appreciate you joining us. We've seen you here after a while, but I want to quickly cut across now to the other question on dynastic politics, or his comments on dynastic politics, which he made when we asked him about the selection of chief ministers recently at that. India Today asked about the thought process behind the selection of fresh faces as chief ministers in the recently won Hindi heartland states. The Prime Minister said, "This is not a new trend. In fact, I am the best example of this practice. Within the BJP, when I became the Chief Minister of Gujarat, I had no prior administrative experience and was not even elected to the Legislative Assembly. Yes, it may appear like a fresh trend because most of the other parties today are Parivarwadi." And then the Prime Minister explained how his party is different from others. He said, and I quote again, "Parivarwadi parties find this democratic churn difficult. The BJP has the ability to nurture multiple generations of leadership at the same time. Look at the presidents of the BJP and you will see fresh faces every few years. Ours is a cadre-based party driven by a clear mission. We all began as grassroots workers and rose through the ranks on the back of dedication and hard work. This commitment is why the nation, especially the youth, feels a strong connection with the BJP in a democracy. It is essential to provide opportunities to new generation, the new blood. This democratic churn is what makes democracies vibrant. This churn is also what makes our party vibrant and keeps aspirations and hopes burning within our Karyakartas. They feel that they too can rise in the party through their hard work. Our party is used to doing different experiments. In Gujarat, we opted for all fresh faces in ministries. In Delhi, we opted for all fresh faces in local corporation elections. Raj, this can be looked at, both ways. One, of course, especially after the 3 chief ministers have been picked, where every Karyakarta can harbor a dream of rising to the top. And that has been elucidated beautifully in this interview by the Prime Minister by even giving his own example and how the party works. But on the other hand, it also, which the opposition many times would want to pick on, that how this is the high command culture, the BJP, the Congressization of the BJP, if one might say.
I think he makes 2 very important points. And if you, there's another question that we'd asked him with regard to the fact that the BJP has no representative in the state, in the south and the east. And he got a little irritated at that point to say, look, if you really look at the entire organization, we are spread quite across and we're quite a pan-national party in that sense. But what he's trying to say in this is 2 things. One, pointing to the various regional parties. And if you see, many of them are dynastic in their successions that's there. I mean, a few of them, of course, are not. But clearly, there are there is no alternative leaders as you see them, whether you see them in Tamil Nadu, whether you come to Mamata Banerjee, you don't have another leader that is there that could take place. And so he's contrasting what is happening in these various parties to what the BJP does by bringing in fresh faces.
Right.
The second point he's also making is that, and he made this point very interestingly, he said, performance versus Parivarwad. You're electing me not because I come from a dynasty, not because my family heritage, not because of anything, but because I have performed. Whereas, hinting at the Congress and others, all of them have come up because they've had families that have pushed them up, the inheritors of a legacy. And therefore, if you look at their performance versus mine is far better. And demonstrating that, we as a party, that the BJP as a party is choosing leaders that have not been a first-time MLA as they did in Rajasthan, and yet we are willing to bring the younger people a new generation of leadership, whereas the others are effete and are decaying in their approach.
Pawan Verma, the fact is there are many ways to look at this. There is no dearth of Parivarwad or, dynastic politics where the BJP is concerned. The Karnataka opposition now being handed in, the reins to Yediyurappa's son, a prime example of that. Many names, Jyotiraditya Scindia, Anurag Thakur. But I would think the point that the Prime Minister is making is that it's not one parivar or one family which makes the final call. If you're good, you'll rise.
No, there's no doubt about it. the fact that someone in politics follows in the footsteps of a parent who is in politics is not dynastic politics. But when the child of a leader is considered the ordained leader by the accident of birth and is followed blindly because of that, that's Parivar politics. And the Prime Minister is absolutely right that it is antithetical to democracy.
Right.
And the opposition must understand this, although I will say that even in parties where the Parivarvad is not there, there is need for more democratic space.
Right.
Preeti, after all, in Parliament there's a whip. And in party forums, the scope for discussion and free debate is
Mr. Verma, I'm running out of time.
Across the political space.
I'm running out of time. 10 seconds, Rajdeep. You want to come in and weigh on
in this context, I just want to add one thing.
Go ahead, sir. Make your point.
I'll just say
very quickly. I'll just say, Rajdeep, just give me a second. But I'll just say that the Prime Minister would be undoubtedly an unquestioned statesman, as he may in future become, if he had implemented more fully and towards 1947, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas. Because I think India is a country where you need that healing touch.
All right, 20 seconds, Rajiv, you're going to close the show.
3 points which come through the interview, which I think are all three the strengths of the Prime Minister. One certainly comes through, which is the strongman, muscular leader who's promising stable leadership. The second point, which I don't think the interview tackled, which is the political Hindu, which will emerge more clearly in 2024 after the Ram Mandir inauguration. But that remains a big strength of the Prime Minister. And the third, which came from your last question, is Kamdar versus Namdar. The fact is, one of the big advantages that Prime Minister Modi has over his principal opponents at the moment, particularly Rahul Gandhi, is when he contrasts Kamdar versus Namdar. And I think in that sense, he has captured the zeitgeist of this aspirational India. Like him or not, he may be a polarizing figure. That, to my mind, remains a big asset that he takes to the
Rajiv, somewhere down the line befitting, because he's coming off being on the ticket on 3 elections and winning those elections handsomely at that, where the Hindi heartland is concerned. So no better choice, Raj, to have him as the newsmaker of the year. I appreciate all you 4 gentlemen for joining us. Thank you there. We're going to leave it at that. And I'm sure the debate on not just the interview, but the BJP's narrative for 2024 will continue. With that, it's a wrap. To stay with us, news and updates continue on the other side.